Good morning, Tampa. It is Saturday morning, and you're listening to AM 820, the Big 8 Tampa, and this is another episode of Let's Go Low with your host, Jeff Stanislow from Golfers Unite. We are talking with our famed caddy corner, Mr. Mike Hicks, who is Payne Stewart's caddy, and we're going to spend this segment just talking about Payne and talking about some of the things that, the relationship, the love of the game, the passion of the game, and working with Payne Stewart, during his lifetime. And so, Mike, thanks for joining us once again.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me, buddy.
So you told the story kind of how you met. You were overseas, and I believe you said that he had a caddy come up to him and was wearing the knickers and the hat, and you're like, oh man, this probably isn't going to work out. Tell us a little story how you guys met.
So we were in Japan. I mean, I knew Payne from 1982 till I started caddying for him in 87, because one of my closest friends at the time, a guy named Rob Kay, who I traveled a lot with, was caddying for Payne. And so I knew Payne. And I was in Japan with Curtis Strange, and Payne had fired Rob, and we didn't know who was going to show up in Japan with his bag. So this guy named Tim Davies, who was an assistant pro at some course in Jacksonville, Florida, shows up in Japan, and then the first round, he comes out in full knicker garb. So he's got the knickers on, the socks, the scanty hat, the whole 9 yards. And we're like, oh, I don't know about this. I don't know how this is going to fly with old Painter.
The twinsies strategy probably
he wasn't wearing the same outfit, but I don't know how Payne took that. I never asked him. But this guy had never caddied before. So we were at a function in Japan, and we're, caddies, players, everybody's there. We're having beers and dinner. And so I went up to him. I said, hey, listen, if this guy doesn't work out, I'd like a shot at the bag, because I was caddying for Curtis on a part-time basis. Me and one other guy named Don Wanstall. I worked half the tournaments, and Donnie worked half the tournaments. But whenever Curtis went out of the country, for some reason, he took me. So I was kind of sick of that. I was ready for, something full-time where I could make a schedule, not have to find off-week bags and that kind of stuff. So I said, hey, if it doesn't work out with this guy, I'd like a shot at the bag. Well, it didn't work out. Payne comes to me and says, hey, let's give it a month and see how it goes. And that month turned into 12 years. We top 10'd all 4 weeks. Could have won 2 of those 4. And I got that job. Payne was, such a great player, but he could not close the deal. He had trouble winning. He could get right there, but on Sunday afternoon, the last 9 holes, he would spit the bit, so to speak. But he started working with Dr. Richard Koop, sports psychologist at North Carolina. And that happened. He started with him about 6 weeks in our relationship. And Dick, I lived in North Carolina. Dick was at the University of North Carolina. When Payne would come to visit, we did the sessions at Hope Valley Country Club in Durham, and I went to all the sessions. So I would just reiterate to Payne what Dick was trying to get him to do. And the rest is history, 3 majors later. And that's the biggest reason Payne Stewart became the player that he was because of Dick Koop.
That's an interesting story. This is Jeff Stanislow. You're listening to Let's Go Low right here on AM 820. And we're talking with Mike Hicks, who was on Payne's bag for 12 years. Talking about some inside stuff, the things that you don't, hear that don't make the broadcast. And this episode's brought to you by Golfers Unite, golfersunite.com, and Mike Hicks Golf, MikeHicksGolf.com. If you guys are doing a special event, an outing, or you got a club championship, you want Mike to be on a bag for your 50th birthday or, 75th birthday or whatever it is, go to MikeHicksGolf.com and maybe you guys can make that happen. But Mike, let's just talk about the knickers. Where did that come from? Where, he came up with it. He must have thought about it, or why did he?
It was actually his father. His father was a salesman, furniture salesman, and his father was a very loud dresser. He believed, the louder you dressed, the more attention that you would create for yourself. And he was right. So I think it was 82. Payne won it up in Quad Cities, Illinois. He shows up on the range the first round. He was wearing Arias clothing, I think it was. And there was 3 other guys on the range warming up, had the same outfit on that he did. And he's like, we got to do something about this. So I guess I think he just went and tracked down a knickers outfit and wore that on Sunday of that week, won the tournament, and that's what he wore the rest of his playing career.
And never looked back. Yep.
And listen, I'll say this. It was a perfect disguise because everybody, associated Payne Stewart with his dress, right? The knickers, the hat, the gold tip shoes, that stuff. He could go out at night. He was just another pretty blonde in the crowd. Nobody knew who he was.
He puts the knickers on and the hat's a different story. But
Payne Stewart, but he could do anything. Whereas, lots of people could never do that.
Sure.
The Shark, he couldn't do it. The Tiger obviously couldn't do it. Jack, Arnold, Payne obviously didn't get that big, but everybody associated Payne Stewart with the knickers.
Yeah. So when did you know it was going to work with Payne? When did you kind of say this is going to work? I mean, you're obviously, it happened fast. So
yeah, well, I think probably the 5th week. No, I shouldn't say that. It was probably the 7th tournament that I caddied for him. He had just started working with Dr. Coop. And we're playing in a off, there was a I don't know if it was a major, it was some big invitational tournament or something that he was not in. And he hadn't qualified for it. I can't remember what it was, but he was playing in Chattanooga, Tennessee at this lower tier tournament. And on Sunday, he was leading the tournament. Sunday, we get behind after 9 holes. And I said to him, look, get your putts to the hole. You're leaving everything short. I said, you can fire me right now, but, let's at least give yourself a chance to make the putts. Get them to the hole. And
you can put whoever you want on the bag, and if you ain't getting the putt there, it ain't going in. So.
Listen, I stuck my neck out there. By saying something to him at the turn. And, as it turns out, he putted well in the back 9, got in a playoff, ended up losing to Phil Blackmore, who made about an 80-footer on the first playoff hole for us to lose. And but he thanked me after that for kicking him in the butt. That's what he said. He said, "Thank you for kicking me in the ass there." He said, "I needed that." And right then I knew that, I was going to be able to, say stuff to him that, some other caddies might not take the chance to do and wasn't going to get fired for it. You know what I'm saying? So I think, probably after 2 months, I knew that it was going to work out. I mean, we just meshed. We got along. We were, a lot in common, and it was just a good marriage.
Yeah, fantastic. This is Jeff Stanislaw. You're listening to Let's Go Low right here on AM 820, the Big 8 radio in Tampa. We're talking with Mike Hicks, and we're talking about Payne Stewart. And Mike is great to talk to him about on the bag with 11 years. So some really good insights. What was Payne like in the locker room? What was his vibe around the other players and, the tournament hosts and stuff?
Well, there was no in between with Payne. You either loved him or hated him. There's a lot of guys did not like Payne Stewart. He would like to needle people. I mean, I watched him needle Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer.
Oh, man.
Arnold Palmer, after Payne Stewart won the 89 PGA in Chicago, we got on an airplane and we flew to Portland, Oregon to play in an event that Peter Jacobson used to have every year. It was called Peter's Party. It was a 2-day event in Portland, Oregon. And it was just for, for really good players. Anyway, Arnold played every year because Peter and Arnold were tight. But the night of the auction on Monday night, there's probably 5,000 people there at this auction. And Payne is feeling no pain, if you know what I'm saying. So he's auctioning off his Bears outfit that he just won the PGA in. And he's got the Wanamaker trophy up there. And Arnold Palmer is sitting in the front row and in front of 5,000 people. Payne Stewart looks down and says, "Hey, Arnold, don't you wish you had one of these?" Because Arnold never won the PGA.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So the king, he did that.
To the king. Wow.
So Payne just look, Curtis Strange, same birth date as Payne. I've watched them roll around on an airplane in first class, drunk out of their minds in a fight, but it was more of a wrestling match. Curtis couldn't stand Payne. But if you could take the needle and you could give it back to him, he enjoyed that. You either loved him or hated him. But it's just a jokester, liked to have fun, just a super nice guy. But if you couldn't take a needle, you didn't like Payne Stewart.
Yeah, exactly. He could take it, he could dish it out, but it was just part of, the man he was. And
That's right. That's right.
Now, speaking of being a jokester, he did like impressions and stuff like that. My understanding. Did he do any, impressions for you, or is that just kind of like more in private?
No, he wasn't much of an impressionist. I never saw that. Practical joker, yes. Azinger holds a bunker shot at Memorial to beat us at Jack's place, and Zinger's doing the media, and Payne stuffs bananas in his street shoes that he's going to wear out of the locker room. Stuffs it with bananas. Stuff like that. I mean, he was just a jokester. Impressionist, though, he wasn't much of an impressionist.
We only got another minute or so left, Mike, and maybe we'll do another segment and talk a little bit more about Payne as the family man, and right. The Payne Stewart Family Foundation does some amazing work. You're going to be out talking more about the stories to our second annual Cars and Cocktails event. It's going to be held on September 11th. We're doing a special remembrance that evening at Avila from 6 to 9 p.m. September 11th. Mike is going to come out. If you're interested and want to learn some more, want some tickets, you can go to appreciateyourservice.org. Again, appreciateyourservice.org. This is Jeff Stanislaw. You're listening to another great episode of Let's Go Low, and we're talking about Payne Stewart with his caddy, Mike Hicks. So what, when you were joking with him, it's like, how was it on the course? Was it jovial? Was it like you guys knew when it was time to get serious? Things of that nature.
Yeah, look, he's like pretty much every other professional golfer other than Lee Trevino, who Lee never shut up the whole time he was out there. Some people liked playing with Lee, some people didn't. I mean, it would get old if you played too much with Lee because he never shut up. Most of those guys, there's not a lot of small talk going on. Even if you notice Scottie and Sam Burns, they weren't walking down the fairway chatting it up, right?
Right.
This is their job. Those guys are best friends. You're trying to beat one another as competitors. So, there was not a lot of joking and small talk going on. Never was. And then there really isn't in the professional golf world when you're playing a tournament round.
Well, fantastic. Mike Hicks, thanks for joining us once again on the Let's Go Low show. We are going to have some more talk about Payne at a future episode. Maybe we'll get into like the famous punch. We'll talk about Pinehurst, some of those, wonderful victories, get a little bit more on Payne's insights and the great things that the Payne Stewart Family Foundation do, with remembrance of Payne. But if you guys want to listen to Mike speak, he's going to be in Tampa on September 11th for a special remembrance second annual Cars and Cocktails at Avila Country Club. You can visit appreciateyourservice.org for event information and tickets, or just Google Appreciate Your Service and you'll find us right away. Mike, thanks again for joining us on Let's Go Low.
You got it, Jeff. Thanks, buddy.